Have you ever played a game of 20 questions? If you have, you already get the basic idea behind one of the most powerful tools in all of machine learning, the decision tree. Today, we're going to break down how this surprisingly simple concept helps computers make some incredibly complex choices. So that's the real challenge, right? How do you teach a computer to make that kind of judgment call? How does it learn to classify something it's never seen before? Well, the solution is really elegant, and it's called a decision tree. So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the basic problem. We live in a world that's just full of labels. Then we'll get into how to think like a tree, and even how they're grown from data. After that, we'll see why a whole forest can be way better than just one tree. And finally, we'll see all of this in action, solving some pretty amazing real-world biological mysteries. All right, let's dive in with the fundamental challenge here. We are surrounded by data that needs to be sorted and labeled. I mean, everything, from figuring out if an email is spam to diagnosing a disease. So the core task for any machine is to figure out the right label for something new. And this isn't just some abstract problem, you know? Think about an oncologist. They're classifying tumors using tons of different features, from patient records, from lab results, all of it. The dream is to build a system that can learn from thousands of those past cases to help classify the next one with incredible accuracy. And that's exactly where the decision tree comes in. At its heart, it's a model that learns from examples that are already labeled, what we call a training set. From there, it figures out a whole series of smart questions to ask so it can predict the label for any new piece of data you throw at it. But how does a tree actually, think? Well, the process is surprisingly straightforward. It just makes predictions, one question at a time. It's basically a flowchart, or maybe an even better way to think about it is a game of 20 questions, but for data. So picture an upside-down tree. You start at the top at the root with your very first question. Your answer, whatever it is, sends you down a specific branch to the next question, which we call a node. You just keep following the path your answers create until you hit the very bottom, a leaf. And that's where you find the final prediction. Let's make this a little more real with an example from bioinformatics. Let's say we want to predict if two proteins are going to interact. The tree might start with a question at the root node, just like this one. Is the correlation of their gene expression greater than 0.9? It's a super simple yes or no question based on the data we have. Okay, so for our protein pair, let's say the answer is yes, the correlation is really high. So we follow that branch down to the next node, and it asks us another question. Do these proteins share a known function? And again, it's just a simple yes or no. Okay, let's say we answered yes again. Boom, we've just arrived at a leaf node. This is the end of the line for this piece of data. Now this leaf represents every single protein pair from our original training data that also answered yes to both of those questions. And it turns out, in that specific group, 80% of them interact. So the tree's prediction is interact. It's really just a majority vote of the most similar examples it's already seen. Now, this is all very logical, but you might be wondering who comes up with these questions, and how does the algorithm know which question to ask first? Well, this is the real magic of growing a tree. It learns the best questions to ask directly from the data itself. The goal at every single step is for the algorithm to find the one single question that will best split a mixed group of data into subgroups that are as pure as possible. And purity here just means a group where most of the items belong to the same class. Think of it like this. On the left, you've got a high impurity group. It's a messy mix of red and green dots, right? And on the right, you have a low impurity group that's almost entirely green. The whole process of building a tree is just about finding the best questions to get you from that messy state over to that clean one. So how does it do this automatically? Well, algorithms use formulas, like entropy or the Gini index, to put a number on how messy each group is. Then they search for the one question that provides the highest information gain, which is just a fancy way of saying the question that cleans up the mess the most. And finally, there's a super important step called pruning. Imagine a student who just memorizes answers for a test, but doesn't actually understand the concepts. That's called overfitting. Pruning is like teaching the tree the real concepts by trimming away branches that are way too specific so it can make smart predictions on new problems it's never seen before. Okay, so a single decision tree is powerful for sure, but it can be a little sensitive. A few small changes in the data can sometimes lead to a totally different set of questions. So, what if we didn't have to rely on just one? This brings us to a really cool idea. There is strength in numbers. And this is the core idea behind a technique called a random forest. Instead of just building one tree, we build hundreds of them. A single tree can be a little unstable, but a whole forest uses the wisdom of the crowd. By combining the predictions from many different trees, you average out the individual mistakes and end up with much, much higher accuracy. The process itself is elegantly simple. First, you grow hundreds, maybe thousands of slightly different trees by training each one on a random sample of your data. Then, to classify something new, you let every single tree in that forest vote on the outcome. And finally, the classification that gets the most votes wins. It's basically democracy for data. This is all great in theory, but where is this stuff actually being used? Where does the rubber meet the road? Let's look at some really powerful real-world applications, focusing on the incredible field of computational biology. The impact here is just huge. Decision trees are helping researchers predict these really complex genetic interactions in yeast. I mean, they're helping uncover the very mechanisms of life. They're a key part of systems that piece together evidence to find the exact location of genes in the human genome. They help us understand which parts of our DNA turn genes on and off. And, like we saw, they're fantastic at predicting which proteins will work together. You know, researchers Carl Kingsford and Steven Salzberg summed it up perfectly. The power of decision trees, what makes them special, is their ability to pull together all these diverse types of data, gene expression, location, function, and use them to make a single, accurate prediction. That versatility is their superpower. So, we're left with this thought: decision trees are so much more than just a clever algorithm. They are a fundamental tool for discovery. They give us an understandable, powerful way to find patterns in incredibly complex data. So, if they're already helping us decode the building blocks of life itself, what's the next frontier they'll help us explore? What's the next big question they're going to help us answer?